And welcome, sports fans, to today's Roundtable, and glad you joined us for this edition of the Sports Roundtable right here Saturday mornings, each Saturday morning, live at 10 a.m. right here on Channel 21 and SeamoreSportsZone.com. And we've got a lot to talk about for today, a lot of action taking place over the last evening and through the week. A couple holiday tournaments that have taken place, got underway, and ended last night, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And also, we've got more Christmas tournaments coming up, notably the Bloomfield Christmas Tournament, which we'll cover all 26 games of, starting the day after Christmas, and also up the way in the Southeast Missourian Christmas Tournament in Cape Girardeau in the Show Me Center. Got that Christmas tournament coming up as well, and we're going to preview both of those tournaments in our later segments. So look forward to that. And also, we've got state rankings out for high school basketball this week, which we'll touch on. And we've got some other sports news in the area as well to report on for this week's Roundtable. So glad you joined us for this week's Roundtable right here on YHC. And last night we were down in Rector for high school basketball as they took on Marmaduke and Rector last night. And we're going to talk about that game in a moment, but it will replay today at noon and 6:30, and also tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m., Sunday at 4. You can catch the replay of Rector and Marmaduke from yesterday evening. And we're going to get into the games that took place last night and talking about that Marmaduke and Rector game. Marmaduke come out on top 56-49. The Marmaduke Greyhounds over the Rector Cougars in that 2A conference matchup last night in Rector. And taking a look at some highlights of that game from last night, as we see here, Rector getting the turnover forced by Eddie Page at a big night, going in for that transition bucket, and now a nice answer by Nick Harden, coming back the way in the first quarter, had a nice night from the field, and a nice putback underneath by the Cougars. And in the first half, it was all Rectors. We see here a nice dribble and dish by Danny Krager for the three. And back the other way, Tyler Val gets hot starting in the second, going into the second half. As we see here, a nice putback there by Winberry. And we see here a nice jumper put up by Andrew Church. And Marmaduke really found the rhythm in the second half as Tyler Val knocks down the shot just inside the three. And now working around the horn as Eddie Page finds an open three at the top of the key, knocks it down. And Rector trying to get back in the game late, got a nice open look off the inbound as that's knocked down for three. But in the end, it was Marmaduke taking control late as Tyler Val knocks down that three. And in the end, it was Marmaduke winning over Rector 56-49. An impressive showing by the Marmaduke Greyhounds, especially in the second half. They really turned it on in the second half. Rector had a hard time knocking down some shots late. They had some open looks to cut into the lead and make it a much closer game, but just come up a little short from the field down the stretch from Rector. But good game last night, and again, you can catch that replay today at noon and 6:30, and tomorrow Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. And taking a look at some games from last night in the Zenith Hornersville Christmas Tournament Championship. It was Armorel, Arkansas, defeating top-seeded Delta C7 51-46. Armorel coming away with that Zenith Hornersville Christmas Tournament Championship. And Delta C7, I believe that was their first loss of the year. Had a really good start, but just falling short to Armorel in that Christmas tournament title last night. And in the third place game, it was Neelyville over Zenith Hornersville in a close one, 65-62. And also in the Clarkton Holiday Tournament Championship, it was Gosnell, Arkansas defeating Gideon. And we don't have a final score for that one, but I think it was around a 15-point victory for Gosnell in that championship game. Gideon, one of those teams looking really good early on, probably taking some by surprise out of the Tri-County Conference so far this season. So look out for those Gideon Bulldogs going forward this year. And also in the third place game, it was 5th seeded Clarkton defeating 3rd seeded East Carter County 78-72. The host Clarkton Reindeer come away with that third place game. And also in the consolation championship, 4th seeded Cooter defeated 7th seeded Portageville 59-55. And also in other games from last night, New Madrid County Central defeated Doniphan comfortably 81-57. Twin Rivers over Clearwater in a close one, 58-56. Woodland over Kelly 74-43. Scott County Central over Malden 88-84, and a nice high-scoring affair between those two schools. And Malden looking to avenge that loss from the Orion Invitational Tournament final from a few weeks ago, but Scott County Central beating Malden again by 4. It was a 4-point spread in the first contest and 4 points once again last night. So two good teams early on between Scott County Central and Malden. And also Sykeston over Notre Dame, 62-32. Comfortable victory for the Sykeston Bulldogs. And Sykeston's had a tough way here early on in the season. I think they've lost 3 straight. And Notre Dame coming off a very impressive victory over New Madrid County Central earlier in the week, and just come up short. Must have a cold night for Notre Dame to lose by 30 points to Sykeston. So we'll probably see quite a bit of that in the CMO Conference this year. Just teams beating everyone across the conference. So it's a nice victory for Sykeston, though, getting a win over Notre Dame last night on their home court. And also Oran over Delta Big, 84-17. Marquand over Chaffee, 59-49. Kirkwood over Jackson, up north, 68-59. Advance over Bloomfield in the Stoddard County Conference, 68-46. Impressive victory for the Advance Hornets last night. Cape Central over Farmington, 57-41. East Prairie over Oak Ridge, 67-35. Dexter over Richland, 75-40. And Dexter gets its first win of the year in the Stoddard County Conference over Richland. And taking a look at girls' games from last night over in the Twin Rivers Lady Royals Christmas Classic Tournament. And these are first-round games. 3rd seeded Naylor defeated 14th seeded Malden, 53-15. 11th seeded Greenville over 6th seeded Charleston in overtime, 72-68. So one of the first upsets of the tournament. Greenville over Charleston. 7th seeded Kelly over 10th seeded Clearwater, 64-59. And those are the games from last night. And a lot of more games to come. The Christmas tournament's coming up, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. And we're going to take a quick break and be along with our guest today. We've got Travis Quertermous in studio with us, talk about the Christmas tournaments coming up and other sports news in the area. And we'll be back with him coming up.
Deposit your check here or here or even there. Deposit your check wherever you are with First Midwest Bank's new mobile deposit. Just tap, snap, deposit. It's that simple. New mobile deposit from First Midwest Bank, serving the communities we call home.
Always on the go? Take the best in TV entertainment with you with New Wave to Go. Now you can enjoy your home television service everywhere, anytime on your laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Watch your favorite channels and sporting events live via the internet. Even access your home DVR to enjoy your recorded shows and movies or to set up future recordings. Prices start at just $12.99 a month. So call us today and ask about New Wave to Go. Another innovative service brought to you by New Wave, your local communications experts.
And we're back, and we're along with Travis Quertermous, who's along with us today to talk about some high school basketball. It's a very exciting time coming into the Christmas tournaments here in the next week, and we've also got quite a few games to talk about from this week that are certainly notable to our area. And Travis, good to have you along with us again.
Thank you, Tyler. Always a pleasure to be on the Sports Roundtable.
Sure. And some very good games this week. The Christmas tournament's done in Zenith Hornersville, and Clarkton wrapped up last night, and getting to see more of those teams work into the season. So some teams to really take a look at this year. I really like what Gideon's done earlier on this year. Played in that
Right.
Clarkton Holiday Tournament Championship last night. They're looking good. It's a very good Gosnell team out of Arkansas.
Right.
And on the other side in the Zenith Hornersville tournament, some teams looking good in it, coming down the end of the way as well.
Yeah, Delta C7 has been one of the pleasant surprises. Good to see the Chargers relevant once again. How about Cooter? The Wildcats have been an afterthought in the Tri-County Conference for years, known for their baseball, but not much for their basketball, and they're playing really well here early on. So with Risco moving out of that Class 1, District 1, there's going to be it's going to be really competitive this year. There's 3 or 4 teams in there. Throw Clarkton into the mix that could come away with that district championship.
Sure, and very
Conference
competitive
championship.
Yeah, conference championship, and very competitive games, notably in the SEMO Conference. Well, we've seen we've seen teams play really well, and then the other teams play very well on the other end. I talked about Notre Dame and the run they've had. They lost to New Madrid in the conference tournament, beat New Madrid on their home court, and the next week, and then last night lose 30 points to Sykeston. So that just shows you how things are going to move in that SEMO Conference this year.
Well, you just look at the way the tournament championship came down to you. Had number 5 New Madrid against number 7 Poplar Bluff.
Yeah.
So on you could have reseeded that tournament and played it the next week, and it'd come out totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, there is so much parity in the SEMO Conference. There's no one dominant team, and on any given night, any one team in that conference could beat any other team. So it's just really well balanced. Good teams, not just a bunch of average teams. You got a lot of good teams in there that will make some noise in the postseason. So it's just a remarkable conference, one of the best in the state, top to bottom.
Certainly. Very, very competitive conference. It's been competitive the past couple of years, but it's just taking it up another level this year with how
Exactly.
deep the conference is. It goes about 7 teams deep, and we'll probably see 7 teams beat up on each other. And
Yes.
you might see a conference champion with 3 or 4 losses this year.
No doubt about it.
And
Yeah,
I-
kind of like the SEC of SEMO basketball. You're just you're going to see a lot of really good teams just beat up on one
Yeah, and
another.
there's probably going to be co-champions this year, I would assume.
That would not surprise me at all.
You might even see a 3-way tie, how it's going to go this year. But certainly a lot of competitive basketball in that SEMO Conference this year. And earlier in the week, we got to do Jackson and Dexter. And Jackson looked really good in that game, and we've got a highlight of that game from earlier in the week, which we'll go ahead and get to. Jackson, one of the top teams in the area this year, and taking a look from the other night, Dexter getting a nice bucket early on, Peyton Pollock with that jump shot, and Jackson very good at ball movement. You see here, they swing it across the court and a nice drive, and conversion there in the paint, and a nice turnaround post play here by the
Good play
Bearcats.
by Addison Moore.
Yeah,
there.
Addison Moore there, and here Jackson working in the transition, getting the easy bucket as they've certainly come by quite a few of those in the game. And a nice post play there, just inside and out for the Jackson Indians. Pull up inside the 3, knocking down the shot against that zone defense. Come away with a very comfortable 70-19 victory over the Bearcats earlier in the week. So Jackson, one of those teams, very strong early on. Took a loss in that SEMO Conference tournament to New Madrid, but had a very sizable victory over Charleston in that 3rd place game.
Yeah, I was at that game that night, and they just flat put it on Charleston. It isn't very often you could say that Jackson is faster than Charleston, but they were that night. They just transitioned back buckets, fast breaks up and down the court, 6 or 7 slam dunks. Blake Reynolds, their star post player, 6'7", headed to Yale University. Yes, that Yale University. He outscored Dexter by himself. He scored 21 points, and Dexter only had 19 in the game. When you're playing a team whose smallest starter is 6'2", and your tallest starter is 6'1", you're in trouble from the get-go, especially when they're faster than you. Dexter tried to slow it down, control the tempo, but against a team as tall and fast and well-coached as Jackson, that's just next to impossible to do. So they're really, really good. They took a loss on the road last night to Kirkwood, did the Jackson Indians, but they're going to be right there in the mix for a conference championship, district championship, Christmas tournament championship, and could really make a deep playoff run. They're exceptionally good.
Yeah, and this could be the year to get to the Final Four. We haven't seen a Class 5 team from Southeast Missouri make it to the Final Four since the Hansborough days.
That's true.
And they're in the mid-2000s, so this might be the year that Jackson can break through. They got close last year, went out to the quarterfinal round, lost to the eventual state champion in the quarterfinal round, and it wasn't a blowout. They lost by maybe 8-10 points. So this might be their year they can get through and get to that Final Four in Columbia, which in Class 5 is just brutal.
Absolutely.
I mean, as soon as you're coming out of districts, you've got St. Louis teams in the district. You got Fox and Seckman and some of those other schools like that. And as soon as you get through districts, you're right into the thick of St. Louis teams, which have always been very good at the Class 5 level.
Right. Throw Poplar Bluff into the mix. The Mules are very good this year. Coach Durden's got them playing very well. They were in the championship of the SEMO Conference Tournament as a 7 seed. So they've got a great player over there in Chris Stocks that can really light it up. So you can't count the Mules out by any stretch.
Sure. So, Jackson, Blake Reynolds, one of the best players in the area, if not, might be the best player in the area if you throw him up there with Delfinko Bogan of Charleston, Willie Jimerson of New Madrid. So you got some really top flight players this year. When you talk about those three especially.
Right.
Delfinko Bogan's going to get a good offer to go to college, and Willie Jimerson probably the same. So we've got some really good top flight players playing at a high level this year.
Just as an aside on that, during the Charleston-Sykeston game at the SEMO Conference Tournament, Coach Dickie Nutt was there
I'm sure
from
he was.
SEMO. I'm sure he was scouting Mr. Bogan and put on a show, especially in the second half. Just in the zone, just could not miss from three-point range, and really brought Charleston back from a 17-point deficit. So that was a great game, one of the best high school basketball games I've seen in a long time.
You probably see Coach Nutt at quite a few SEMO Conference games this year. There's a lot of talent in there to scope out.
That's true.
Yeah.
So that was a great game, and and even among the smaller schools, you've got some really talented players. Look at Kyle Moore down at St. Hornersville, dropped 53 points on Caruthersville the other night. He's averaging about 40 a game down there.
Wow.
Cortez Dobbins down at Malden, Jeffrey Porter down at Scott County Central, Indiquel Presbury at Hayties putting up big numbers this year. So a lot of very talented players here in Southeast Missouri this season.
Yeah, and seeing Hornersville, they talk about this Victor Dukes kid coming in semester. So that's
and another boy, the Autry boy, coming in off of injury. He's been injured and unable to play, and he should be ready to go. So, watch out for Zenith Hornersville after the break.
Yeah, and they're playing well already.
They sure are.
They're playing well. They took a loss
another one of
last
those
night.
surprise teams down there with. Speaking of Dickie Nutt, his son, I forget if it's Logan or Lucas. One of them's at Woodland, one of them's down at Zenith, but has really done a good job turning that program around.
Yeah, and with talent like Victor Dukes coming from Nettleton, Arkansas, one of the top players in Arkansas, it's going to make them even that much stronger. In Class 3, they moved up to Class 3, and we talked about Zenith. It's one of them teams that hasn't played competitively, even in Class 2, and then they started to get competitive over the last couple of years with this talented class, and then they move up to Class 3, and it's just like, it's just gloom and doom for Zenith Hornersville, but they're putting together a strong team, going to be even stronger in the spring semester.
And New Madrid County Central had to breathe a sigh of relief when Charleston moved out of that district. But then here comes Zenith Hornersville, here comes Hayti up into that district. And neither team will be an easy out.
Yeah.
So it should still be New Madrid's district to lose, but won't be easy by any stretch.
Yeah, very competitive Class 3 district so far, the way it's looking so far this year. It is in New Madrid, I believe, this year, that district
is that
tournament.
Right?
I think so. So at least New Madrid's got that working for them.
Home court advantage,
coming
yes,
down
indeed.
to the end of the year. So, we've got these Christmas tournaments coming up, Travis, and notably we're going to be covering the Bloomfield Christmas Tournament here on YHC TV and CMOSportZone.com. We'll go ahead and get to those this tournament, and gets underway the day after Christmas on the 26th. And take a look at the matchups. First round matchups: top seeded Hayti versus 16th seeded Richland. Second seeded Malden versus 15th seeded Van Buren. Third seeded Kennett versus 14th Doniphan. Fourth Bernie versus 13th East Prairie. Fifth Twin Rivers versus 12th Holcomb. Sixth Dexter versus 11th Portageville. Seventh Bloomfield versus 10th Puxico. Eighth South Pemiscot versus 9th Saxony Lutheran. So those are your first round matchups for this year's Christmas tournament. So not very often we get to see Hayti and Malden atop the Christmas tournament. We're used to seeing Bernie, Kennett, Portageville right there making up pretty much the top 3 or 4. And that means we're getting a little turnover in this year's tournament.
It's true.
Hayti and Malden leading the way with the top 2 seeds. And you've got your mainstays there with Kennett and Bernie. And then Twin Rivers, Dexter, and Bloomfield looking all right early on this year. Might make it interesting as a 7 seed. That could potentially play Malden there in the second round. Then the quarterfinals might make an interesting matchup there in the quarterfinals. So it's going to be a competitive tournament, more competitive than what we've had in years past.
That's exactly right. A lot of parity here in this tournament this year. We're used to seeing the last 5 or 6 years Kennett really dominate this thing, except for the year that Holcomb upset them a couple years ago in the championship game. But Kennett comes in as the 3 seed this year, still a very dangerous basketball team. They shouldn't have any trouble with Doniphan. They're winless on the year here. But Hayti and Malden, very interesting there, sitting at the top. Hayti comes in as the lone undefeated team, but they're by no means the juggernaut that these Kennett teams have been coming in, rather, dominating the tournament in the last few years. Malden is an outstanding team. They've got a little size this year to go along with Cortez Dobbins, who's sort of done it all for them since his freshman year there on the varsity. So their only 2 losses are to Scott County Central, and by 4 points each time, as you mentioned earlier in the program. The couple of games that intrigued me here in the first round, I really thought East Prairie was seated too low at number 13. That's not going to be an easy first round game for Bernie. They're not quite. Bernie's off to another great start. Coach Botch always has his team ready to play. But that's a pretty scrappy team down there in East Prairie. They bring back all their starters but one. They're having a pretty good season so far. They come in with a winning record. Bernie struggled last night with Bell City. They beat them by 3 points. So they better come in prepared to play. And then the Dexter-Portageville game. That's another potential first-round upset as I see it. Dexter comes in with just 1 win. They played a really brutal schedule here early on, as they always do, a lot of SEMO conference games. Portageville's a pretty scrappy squad as well. Those are a couple of games, in my opinion, to keep an eye on that really could go either way.
Yeah, one of the, this tournament really, what I, looking at it, I thought, Malden and Hayti would be up there probably in the top 5 coming into the season. But South Pemiscot, I thought that was a team that would be up there towards the top, as they finished great last year, bringing back some good players this year. Them at number 8, they've gotten off to a slow start.
Yes. And
it's probably going to take them the whole year to be where they want to be. So, South Penn there at number 8 is probably the only surprising team coming into the year. I wouldn't have thought they'd been at the 8th seed, but a dangerous team at number 8. South Penn.
No doubt about it. Coach Bidewell does a great job down there. Son of the legendary Coach Jim Bidewell that guided Portageville to some state championships back in the day. But you're right, they're off to an uncharacteristically slow start, but they could be a sleeper team. Watch out for Saxony Lutheran as well. They come in 4-2, 5-2, so they're a dangerous team at that 9 seed. Bloomfield, still a fairly young team, but playing pretty well. They took one on the chin last night from Advance, but another team on their home floor that could be dangerous also.
Sure. So, it's going to be a very competitive tournament, especially, the first round games. They can be some blowouts, but towards the end of the day, there'll be some close games there once you get to, your 4 versus 13, 5 versus 12. Those will be some pretty good games in the first round. But the second day, certainly going to be some close games there.
Yeah, going to be a great second round there.
Just, looking at if it all chalks up to the seeds advancing, Hayti versus South Pemiscot, Malden versus Bloomfield, Kennett versus Dexter, Bernie versus Twin Rivers in the quarterfinals. So some of those teams have already matched up. I know Haytie's beaten South Pemscott already pretty handily. I know Bernie's beaten Twin Rivers in that Holcomb tournament earlier in the year. So
Kennett beat Dexter in the SEMO Conference tournament, but Dexter actually had a 10-point lead in that game at halftime and just sort of fell apart in the second half. So if they can put a complete game together, they can give Kennett a game, no doubt about it.
So very good matchups potentially in that quarterfinal round, and it's going to be a very competitive tournament. I would say probably we don't have that, like you said before, we don't have that runaway juggernaut team that just rolls through the tournament. So, at the caliber of talent for the teams probably not as high, but a lot more competitive. I've said for the whole year, there's not really any kind of 5-star caliber team in Southeast Missouri this year, but there's a lot of 4-star, very good teams this year. There's a bigger quantity of those teams this year. So that's what's going to make a great year. We've got a lot of very good teams out there.
Right.
Not exceptional teams, but very good teams that can make deep runs in state tournament play and make things a whole lot more competitive here locally.
And there's so much parity in the different conferences. We talked about the SEMO Conference, the Tri-County Conference, the Boot Hill Conference. The only team that's really conference that's got just a dominant standout team would be the Scott Mississippi Conference there with Scott County Central. The Stoddard County Athletic Association is going to be up and down. Those teams, I think, will beat up on each other over the course of the season. So
with Woodland coming along really
exactly,
makes it competitive.
Yeah, Woodland's come roaring out of the gate. Bernie beat them, handed them their first loss. So there you go.
win.
I mean, that's just an example on any given night. And we mentioned Bell City just about upended Bernie last night. Only lost by 3. So it's going to be a really, really good season for all of these conferences, just up and down and a lot, really unpredictable. And I think that makes for a lot of excitement among the fan base. And you'll see a lot of good crowds at these games as a result.
What I like to see is some teams that have struggled for so long start to be competitive. That's what you talk about. Woodland. They actually had a pretty decent year last year. Played in that Stoddard County tournament final, lost to Bernie, but you could tell coming back they would have something to bring back, especially with Zach Bill coming there from Leopold, makes them more competitive. So by the end of the year, they're going to be right there in the hunt for that Stoddard County title. And also Bell City starting to come on. C.J. Hadley doing a good job down there. Got some young talent that is developing. So that's good to see that these teams and programs that have struggled starting to be competitive and playing at a high level. That's what you want to see. You don't want to see these schools and programs be in the basement for so long. And when you talk about, you mentioned that team, you just kind of shrug and you kind of put a frown on your face about their program, but that's not the case for some of these schools. Starting to put some teams together and turn some heads when it comes to local basketball.
Yeah, so and that's always good for those schools and those fan bases.
Yeah, it sure is. It makes it a lot more. Makes the school experience that much more fun.
Absolutely,
it should be. Now, all the kids certainly deserve that. So, again, the Bloomfield Christmas Tournament will be live right here on Channel 21 on your New Wave cable and online at SEMOsportzone.com. All 26 games of the Bloomfield Christmas Tournament live once again this year, starting the 26th at 10 a.m. And it's a Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday tournament this year. Christmas on Thursday, 4 days following Christmas, but taking off Sunday. They'll always take off Sunday, so it's Friday, Saturday, skipping Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday for this year's Christmas tournament. And transitioning to the Southeast Missourian Christmas tournament up the way in Cape Girardeau at the Show Me Center. Here are the first round matchups up there. First seeded Jackson taking on 16th Delta. Second, Cape Central versus 15th Chaffee. Third, Notre Dame versus 14th Oak Ridge. Fourth, Scott County Central versus 13th Kelly. Fifth, Charleston versus 12th Leopold. 6th, Woodland versus 11th Bell City. 7, Advance versus 10th Bell. I got a team missing out of there. But 8th, Scott City versus 9th Orion. So
Meadow Heights is
Meadow
the
Heights,
11 seed.
The 11 seed, and then Bell City, the 10 seed.
I believe that's Meadow Heights is 10, Bell City's 11.
Okay. So Advance
plays Meadow Heights in the first round.
Advance versus Meadow Heights and Woodland versus Bell City. Okay. It wouldn't be right if we didn't have a typo somewhere. There's the first round matchups. Jackson, certainly the runaway top seed, but Cape Central and Notre Dame going to be there to make it interesting. Very competitive teams this year, SEMO conference teams as we've talked about. So who knows who could come away with this tournament. I figured it would be one of those top 3 teams in Jackson, Cape Central, Notre Dame. Scott County Central, very good team, but a much smaller school team that would have a hard time matching up with the likes of Jackson or even Cape Central. So I think Scott County Central will make a run. Even Charleston right there, the 5 seed, right there in the mix as well. So it's probably going to be a SEMO conference team coming away with it once again this year.
Yeah, I don't have any doubt about it. There's a pretty significant drop-off once you get beyond the first 5 teams. Woodland's a very good team. Advance potential dark horse. Scott City's only lost 1 game this season. That was to Woodland. But beyond that, Jackson, Cape, Notre Dame, Scott Central, Charleston, prohibitive favorites, and I'd say almost certainly going to see a Jackson versus Cape Central final here.
Yeah, and Notre Dame, they've been up, they've been down here the last week. Yeah, they've
up and down.
It depends on
Charleston's been the same way this season. Looked great against Sykeston, especially in the second half. Just absolutely fell apart against Jackson the next night. Scott County Central is an interesting team. I just don't think they've got the size or the depth to really match up with Notre Dame, Cape Central, or Jackson. That's going to be a great second-round game, though, with Charleston, though. Those two teams are virtual mirror images of each other. But, it's Charleston, as long as they've got Del Bogan, who's probably the best player in SEMO on the floor, and he can go off for 40 points on any given night, Charleston can be right there in the mix and play with anybody. But right now, I'd probably say Jackson and Cape Central are really the 2 best teams, literally head and shoulders above everybody else. Notre Dame's got Pothras there, stands about 6'7". Woodland has the Beal kid, about 6'5" or 6'6". Meadow Heights is putting together a good season. They're one of those teams you mentioned has been down for several years, and they put together a pretty solid season here in the early going. But outside of really the top 2 teams, I think that's they're the class of the tournament.
It certainly has been the past few years, and SEMO Conference dominated, especially the past few years. Scott County Central had their way early on with the Otto Porters and those players. They kind of ruled that tournament in that time, but certainly belongs to the SEMO Conference here in the last few years. So that's taking place up in the Show Me Center in Cape Girardeau, starting the day after Christmas as well. And we're going to go ahead and take a short break. We're going to come back with some state rankings, talk about those. Not very many teams from Southeast Missouri in those state rankings early on.
Surprisingly.
Surprisingly. But we're going to come back and talk about that and, among other things, coming up next.
What is your emergency? Need assistance at County Road 61 and Highway 9. Help is on its way.
Clear! There's a better way to jumpstart your soil back to health. Apply Endzone to protect and increase nitrogen efficiency without killing bacteria. Apply Prevent to increase phosphorus availability and reduce fixation. Better yet, use them both to get more from your fertilizer investment and see higher potential yields. Ag Explorer, your prescription for healthy soil.
Welcome to NFL Total Access,
the show that takes you inside the locker room and down on the field. With inside access to all 32 teams all year long. NFL Total Access, Monday through Saturday, only on NFL Network.
NFL Network, where football season never ends.
And we're back, and now we're going to take a look at some state rankings for high school basketball and taking a look at Class 1 For the first poll from the Missouri Basketball Coaches Association, in Class 1, Leeton on top at number 1. 2, Medville. 3, Community. 4, Stanberry. 5, Hardin Central. 6, Novinger. 7, South Iron. 8, Glasgow. 9, Pilot Grove. And 10, Max Creek. So no local teams. They're in Class 1 of those state rankings. We're used to seeing Scott County Central up there at the top each year, but they move up to Class 2, so no longer seeing Scott County Central there in Class 1. And there's some teams here I haven't really heard of much before, so this is kind of it's a little different seeing these teams in this poll.
Right, and of course these early season polls, and they're going to change quite a bit. You might see a Gideon or a Delta C7 sneak into this poll, but by year's end, I think both those teams going to have probably potential 20-win seasons. So we'll see how that develops. But I'm with you. Outside of a few of these teams, Medville, Stanberry, South Iron, Max Creek, I'm really not familiar with many of them
Leeton,
at all.
I can't say that I've seen them in the poll before. It might escape me, but Glasgow is one of those teams that's always up there. South Iron, we got to see them play Bernie, and they're a very good Class 1 team as they've been in years past. And I would venture to say that they're at least a top 5 team, probably more like top 3. I mean, they're one of the best Class 1 teams in the state. I'm pretty confident. So, like you said, this early poll, you kind of put these polls together going off last year, and with the classifications moving around, that makes a difference too. When you some of these schools might have moved down, so they kind of maybe hold them at a higher level since they moved down in class versus maybe a team moving out. So we'll probably see quite a bit of movement in that poll.
I saw you had number 3 was community. Well, now what community is community?
I know it's.
Is that the name of a school?
Yeah, I think it's didn't really get the clarification on there, but either way, I think there'll be quite a bit of movement in that poll for this year, and that's what's going to make a difference too. These, excuse me, the classifications. If a team moves down a class, it's like, well, okay, they're perceived as a higher caliber team if they move down a class. So maybe some of these teams are getting a little bit more recognition by moving down a class. So maybe that's some of the.
And maybe this will be South Iron's year to make a good deep playoff run. They've been such a powerhouse in the regular season the last few years and just have not been able to get by Eminence in districts. Of course, Eminence won the state championship a couple seasons ago, but they're not quite the team they have been in the last few years. They're off to a slow start. So maybe that'll be South Iron's ticket to making a deep playoff run this
South
year.
Iron's. They're on par with what they've been. They might be even better than what they've been. They've got some really nice talent on that team this year, so they should make another run this year. And moving to Class 2, Iberia at number 1, 2 Crane, 3 Osceola, 4 Gainesville, 5 Hartville, 6 Salisbury, 7 Scott County Central, 8 Sacred Heart, 9 Bernie, and 10 Greenfield. So Scott County and Bernie cracking the top 10 in the first poll for Class 2, and seeing some of the more familiar names there with Iberia, Crane, Hartville, Salisbury, of course Scott County. They're going to be competitive in Class 2 as they move up, and Bernie in there as well. So Class 2 is going to be very competitive.
I'm a little surprised Scott County Central is ranked as low as number 7, to be honest with you. They've only had one loss on the season to an out-of-state team. So yeah, I mean they're going to continue to move up that poll. I have no doubt. Well, and probably Bernie too.
As I mentioned, it's one of those instances where they're Class 1, move up to Class 2. Class 2 has been very competitive. I mean they've had some really good teams in Class 2 over the years, and you move up to that Class 2, and they'll probably discount Scott County a bit just because they move up a class. So that's probably why you're seeing a lower ranking. So
well, but when you have 17 state championships. That ought to buy you a little bit of respect, I would think. Yeah. But both those teams are in the same district, Scott County Central and Bernie this year. So only one of them can advance, and that they'll be fighting tooth and nail there in that district. And some other pretty solid teams in there as well, with South Pemiscot, for example, being in that district. So, it's going to that'll be a thrilling one. They don't play in the regular season, so but it's going to be a tough out, whichever one comes out of that district.
Sure, but that's one thing. Gosh, I was going to mention Advance, how well they've played, but they moved down to Class 1.
And along with Oran.
Yeah, the Oran moving down to Class 1, so you can see those teams in the Class 1 eventually, especially that big win Advance had over Bloomfield.
Surprising.
Very sizable victory last night.
Not that they won, but that they won by as many points as they did.
Yeah.
So Oran and Advance could very definitely make some noise in Class 1 this year.
Sure.
But again, you're looking at both teams in the same district, so
Yeah.
only one can advance. Big rivalry between those two schools.
And in Class 3, Barstow at number 1, 2 Madison Prep, 3 Eugene, 4 Tolton Catholic, 5 Stratford, 6 O'Hara, 7 Whitfield, 8 Cardinal Ritter, 9 Park Hills Central, and 10 Lafayette County. So the only Southeast team in there is Park Hills Central. So I was intrigued by Park Hills Central making it into that Class 3, but probably not your New Madrid County Central. Potentially even Charleston.
Right. I wasn't really surprised that Charleston wasn't in the top 10 early on. They really struggled coming out of the gate. They were just sitting around 500. I was a little surprised to see Park Hill Central in the mix. They're a very good team. Don't know if they're quite top 10 caliber. Was a little surprised that Madison Prep wasn't ranked number 1. They're the 2-time defending state champions in Class 3. Watch out for Tolton Catholic. They've got a couple of big boys in there in the post.
Where are they out of?
I'm not exactly sure on that point. Cardinal Ritter, of course, will be strong this year. Charleston graduate, and his name escapes me. Corey Frazier is the head coach up there at Cardinal Ritter.
Did he go to Cardinal Ritter?
I believe so.
He was at
Maplewood. He's at
Maplewood.
Maplewood. Yeah, you're right. He's at Maplewood. But Class 3 is going to be really competitive this year. And I won't be a bit surprised to see New Madrid and Charleston right there in the mix before it's all said and done.
I know New Madrid, it's hard to make a case for New Madrid that top 10 poll just because they fell out of the semifinals of the district play last year. So it's hard to, you got to do well in the previous season to really get a lot of recognition in the first poll of the next year. So, New Madrid is going to have to play their way into the favor of the sports writers this season just because, they didn't come away with a district title or play in the district title game, falling out in the semifinals. So, they'll certainly be there in the mix when the year goes on. If they don't take, some losses in that CMO conferences, they're going to be beating up on each other. So that might work against them.
And they did win the CMO conference tournament, which is one of the toughest conference tournaments in the state.
Yeah.
So I would think that would have gotten them a little bit of recognition there to do that. And maybe this poll was made before that tournament was played out. But I think they're definitely deserving of a top 10 spot in Class 3 right now.
Well, when you talk about the Class 3, Park Hills over in one of those other districts and some good Class 3 schools down here, they could certainly potentially meet to have a really good state tournament game down the road.
Yeah, Park Hill Central will almost surely win their district. It's fairly weak, and they're definitely the best team in it. So they will. They'll be waiting for a New Madrid or a Charleston somewhere down the road, I'm sure.
And in Class 4, St. Charles West at number 1, 2 Jeff City Helias, 3 Lincoln Prep, 4 St. Francis Borgia, 5 Lafayette of St. Joseph, 6 Rolla, 7 Moberly, 8 Westminster Academy, 9 Parkway West, and 10 Pacific. And again, no Southeast Missouri teams in there in the mix. So Sykeston, Notre Dame,
Cape
Central, not in there in the mix. You'd think they would have cracked that top 10.
They were district champions, lost in the sectionals. But still, look at all the talent they're bringing back, especially when you've got someone like 6'6" Andre Statham right there in the middle, already signed with Jacksonville State of the Ohio Valley Conference. So they're 7-1. I got Al Young in there, of course. So I think they're definitely top 10 worthy. They're in Class 4. And again, I think when it's all said and done, you'll see them somewhere in that top 10. So, outstanding basketball team.
Yeah, we're always used to seeing Sykes in there in the mix, but they're They come back to the pack a bit.
Yeah,
Sykeston.
they lost 8 players to graduation, so it's a young squad, fairly inexperienced at the varsity level. But they have got a superstar in the making over there at Sykeston by the name of Fred Thatch Jr. He's a freshman already starting on the varsity, and he is outstanding. They've got another young man there, a transfer from California, named Calero, Anthony Calero, who's a very talented player. And throw in Dyes and Blissett, they'll gel. They're going to be right there in the mix for district championship.
Is that California, Missouri?
No, California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. On the West Coast.
Okay. So,
yes.
Yeah, Sykeston's going to be right there in the mix again. Just
Coach Gibbs will have them ready to play when it's all said and done. They're going up to
that's football. Yeah,
Coach
Hollifield
Gibbs,
basketball.
Hollifield, yes, Coach Hollifield, both Hall of Fame coaches.
Yeah.
But they, Hollifield will have them ready to play come district time. They're going to be they're a very dangerous basketball team. They're going up to St. Louis to play in the St. Dominic's tournament. They're the 3-time defending champion in that tournament, but they're not the top seed this year. Seeded second or third, I believe. And we mentioned New Madrid. They're headed over to Carbondale to play in a big Christmas tournament. They usually take Christmas off, but this year Coach Day has them in a Christmas tournament, and good for them. That'd be good. That'd be good for them.
Good teams over there. I remember we played in that in my days over there. At Southern Illinois basketball, there's quite a few good teams over there that compete at a high level. You really see there's smaller schools over there. They're, at least in my time, they had a really good reputation over there among their small schools, and they play at a high level. So it's a tough tournament going up to Carbondale. You know that's not an easy drive over there to Carbondale. So.
I have no idea what seed they drew in that tournament. I know you told me during the commercial break it's a 16-team tournament, and where they landed in that mix, I don't know. You'd think they would be seated somewhere near the top.
It's a 16-team tournament over there. They do it a little different than most tournaments. They have two. It's a 16-team tournament, but they break up into basically two 8-team tournaments, and they've got, if their classifications, they may have changed, but they did have A and double A. They might have more classifications now, I'm not sure. But basically it was the larger schools in one 8-team bracket and the smaller schools in another 8-team bracket. And they're actually in the smaller school bracket. If that's the format that they still use, which I'm sure they do. It's a long tradition of doing that. So they're playing the smaller type schools, but still, yet those smaller schools play at a very high level. Yeah, so
it'd be good. Be better certainly than just sitting home and doing nothing over the Christmas break. Yeah. So I'm glad they're getting a little action.
New Madrid's bounced around a bit. They were in the Poplar Bluff Showdown for quite some time, and then moved to the Carbondale tournament, and then they were down in Dyersburg playing in a tournament down there. Right. And I think in the last year or so they've taken Christmas off, but looks like they're back in a tournament again this year.
And I'm glad to see that. I hope they do well. Yeah. And that Poplar Bluff Showdown, a little later in the year, we usually see it this week as well with the other Christmas tournaments, but it's closer to New Year's.
Yeah, they start maybe the 28th, maybe. So,
some good teams in that. I was looking at the bracket on that just the other day, and that's a round robin format over there at Poplar Bluff. So some good schools over there. And I'm glad it's a little later in the year. I never get to see any of those games because of the Bloomfield Christmas tournament, but I may get over there and watch a little bit of that this year.
Yeah. And we'll wrap up with Class 5. Or we already did. Did we do Class 5?
No. Did Class 4.
Either way. Okay. I might have one of these wrong then. But I don't think St. Charles at number 1. I think that was Class 4. But either way, a little mix up there. 2 Webster Groves, 3 Kickapoo, 4 Christian Brothers College, 5 Blue Springs South, 6 Waynesville, 7 McClure North, 8 Hazelwood Central, 9 Fort Zumwalt South, and 10 Lee Summit North. And a little snub to the Jackson Indians in this poll.
Yeah, a little bit surprising, especially since they went all the way to the quarterfinals in last year's tournament, state tournament. And Jackson's another team, though, with enough talent. They'll be there in the end. Jackson's playing up at Jefferson City today. They played up at Kirkwood last night and then went down the road, and they'll play Jeff City. Cape Central's up there playing today as well, but I'm not sure who they're playing. Some kind of a shootout up there. So, but Jackson, I think, will, when it's all said and done, they're very soon, especially if they win the Christmas tournament up at the Show Me Center, they'll be in that top 10.
Yeah, well, the toughest team that they got coming back from last year, made that run to the quarterfinals, played that team escapes me who won it all last year in Class 5, but they only lost to the eventual state champion by 8-10 points and bring back a very strong team this year.
Right.
So you would think they would get that recognition coming into this year, but just a little snub there for the Jackson Indians, but they'll certainly be in that poll before the year's up there in Jackson. We're going to take another quick break and talk about some more sports news that's going on in the area. So we got some more to talk about, so don't go away.
Introducing New Wave Wi-Fi at home. Now you can stay connected to the web and not the wall. One connection connects multiple computers, so you can surf the internet from any room in your home with no wires, no worries, and no limits to what you can do. Everything is included. One simple call is all it takes. Connect everyone, everywhere with New Wave Wi-Fi at home.
Wireless modem service now included with every bundle package. Call 1-888-8-NEW-WAVE to
And we're back, and we're going to continue to talk about some other sports news in the area. I know we talked about Christmas tournaments, and the girls' Christmas tournaments are still underway and starting to wrap up. The Lady Royals Classic tournament over in Twin Rivers, Broseley, got underway, and some of the top seeds, Neelyville, Dexter, got victories. We saw an upset. Greenville over Charleston, 11 over a 6 seed, so that's one of the early upsets. But
also Donovan knocked off New Madrid. That was a 12 over a 5.
Okay.
Not a real big surprise there because Donovan beat them right after the seedings were announced. They played and Donovan beat them, so not a big surprise there. But this tournament, has been dominated by the Dexter Lady Bearcats the last few seasons, and they're the number 1 seed again and one of the favorites to win it. But not an overwhelming favorite. Neelyville is really good. Naylor is always very good. Twin Rivers is very solid again. So any one of those 4 teams, I think, could win that thing this year.
Yeah, Naylor's really played well early on. They're the Class 1 school, and they've kind of had their way in Class 1 with such limited number of schools playing Class 1 at the girls' level, and they really put it on Cape Central.
Yes,
I think it was either earlier this week or last week. And put it on pretty good, a Class 4 school. So they've done really well early on.
Yeah, got a very solid girls program there at Naylor, have for several years.
Yeah, and Dexter coming back to the pack a bit compared to their last few teams, but still the number 1 seed and the favorite to win that tournament.
Right.
And Neelyville and Naylor are going to be competitive in that tournament, so it'll be a much more competitive tournament this year.
I think so, yeah. The first round... not a whole lot of surprises. We mentioned a couple of upsets, but here from the second round on, the second round beginning play today, and that wraps up Monday and Tuesday are the championship games. Going to be a lot of good basketball played over there at Twin Rivers among the girls' teams.
Yeah, so we probably won't see that just runaway train with the Lady Bearcats this year, although they're still the favorite to win it, but going to be a much more competitive tournament, and some teams, they see that opportunity. They're certainly going to try to take advantage of it. So,
and there's a lot of schools that are going to be looking for a little payback because Dexter has just dominated girls basketball in such a big way here in SEMO for the last few years. They're going to be fired up to play Dexter, and they're going to get every team's best shot every night. They've got a lot of young players this year. They're starting a couple of freshmen. But some freshmen with size. You're looking at a couple of girls 5'10", 6 foot tall, but inexperienced. So if you're going to get them, now's the time to get them because probably next season they're going to be right back up there at the top of the heap again.
You got to get them while they're young.
Get them while they're young, yeah.
And going over to the Kelso Supply girls tournament, Christmas tournament up in Cape Girardeau at the Show Me Center, and that's the championship game of that is Monday, I believe.
Monday night, yes.
And that'll be Jackson and
Saxony Lutheran. Yeah, the top 2 seeds, Saxony Lutheran number 1, Jackson number 2. And Saxony's undefeated so far this year. Jackson just 1 loss on the year. So that ought to be a very good game. Saxon and Lutheran made that run to the Final Four last year in girls basketball. Kind of took it on the chin in their 2 games up in Columbia, but they'll be better for that. And they're just an outstanding team as well, and won't be at all surprised to see them right back in the mix with Class 3 there at the Final Four. Jackson's got a great young player in Cassidy Tomsu, sophomore, junior, I'm not sure exactly which. So that ought to be a real good game Monday night.
Yeah, should be, and we'll be looking forward to those girls' tournaments wrapping up here in the next week, and before the boys' Christmas tournaments, the notable ones for the area, Bloomfield Christmas Tournament and the Southeast Missourian Christmas Tournament get underway starting the day after Christmas. So a very exciting time. Get the family together, all the families for Christmas, and of course the day after, go watch some basketball.
Go watch some basketball, absolutely.
So it'll be fun to see once again this year. And Travis, will transition to some other sports news throughout the area. I know wrestling's well underway,
right.
And how about you give us some information about the local wrestling scene?
Okay. Well, of course, as is always the case, Jackson is the top wrestling team in the area. They're undefeated in duels this year. They'll probably win the Tiger Classic, which is underway this weekend, started last night, continues today. They're in Cape Girardeau. So they're outstanding once again this year. Just always loaded from top to bottom. Jackson just always is such a powerhouse in wrestling. Sykeston is off to a great start this year. They've only lost maybe 1 or 2 duels this year. They're also competing up at the Tiger Classic this weekend. Farmington is always very solid, along with St. Genevieve. And I think St. Genevieve may be undefeated this year so far also. They, along with Dexter, are wrestling across the state in a tournament in Harrisonville. Both teams, I'm sure, wanting to get a look at some of the schools and athletes they may be competing against at the state tournament in February. Dexter is off to another great start. You know, Trevor Waldner won a state championship for Dexter last year, and they're off to another great start. They've only lost 1 duel this year, and that was to Sykeston, a close loss to them. They won a tournament up in St. Louis last weekend, so they're really off to a great start. Haven't gotten an update from them in terms of how they're doing up at Harrisonville. So we've got a new team competing in wrestling this year in Kennett. This is their first year, and they've actually won a duel. So the Pixley brothers got the football team turned around, and they'll lay a good foundation for the wrestling program. Valley Catholic's another new wrestling program this year. Haven't heard much from them as far as how they're doing. New Madrid is doing much better. Notre Dame is still struggling. Cape is struggling. Poplar Bluff is pretty solid. They had a real good duel against Dexter, and Dexter ended up winning by like 3 points. So it was really a back and forth type of thing. So just real exciting. If you get a chance to go out and watch some wrestling, folks, it's really an exciting sport. A lot of action. It's more of an individual thing, of course, but there's a lot of good wrestlers in the area this year that should really do well in their respective district and state tournaments. So get out there and watch some wrestling if you get a chance. Go on your school's websites, look at the schedule. cmobile.com has all the schedules as well. So check that out and go out and support some of these local wrestling. If you get a chance to go up to the Tiger Classic at Cape this year at the high school, go out and see it, because you'll really be impressed at the caliber of the athletes.
Sure. And notably, Kennett coming in with their first year program. So you've seen some. I've even seen some middle schools starting to introduce wrestling at the middle school level. So
yeah, middle school wrestling really only lasts about a month. It just starts and then it's over. But Dexter again had a real good middle school program, so there's a lot of talent coming up, and so it's an exciting thing to be a part of. It would be nice to see it get a little bit more coverage. It's just so much in the shadow of basketball, both boys and girls in the winter sports. But it's really a great competition. Dexter probably going to send, I think we sent 10 athletes to state last year, and we should probably send 8, 9, 10 grapplers to state this year. So looking forward to an outstanding season for Dexter Bearcat Wrestling, and just in general, a lot of good athletes.
Sure. So there's been some really good performances at the state level over the last years, and across Southeast Missouri. So
always bring home several medals from state too. And we don't have a lot of schools that offer wrestling. I am glad to see it grow. be a good sport for a lot of small schools to look into.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't want the competition with basketball, but beyond the mats, and of course having a coach with the knowledge to teach it, it's a fairly inexpensive sport, and you talk about conditioning. These are the best conditioned athletes in sports, really in high school and college. The training and the discipline, the diet. The conditioning, they're 6-minute matches, 3 2-minute matches. But if you're not in tip-top shape, you are sucking wind and you are done by the end of the 3rd round, let me tell you what, if you get that far.
Yeah.
So they really work hard and deserve a lot of respect and support.
Sure. So we'll be tracking the wrestling scene going forward as well. And it's been very competitive here in Southeast Missouri. And before we go, Travis, I'm trying to think if there's anything that we may have overlooked that's been in the headlines over the last week or so.
The bowl season is underway today, and college football, and of course a lot of controversy around the playoff and the teams that got in and the teams that didn't get in. I personally think they got it right, but there are probably a few folks in Texas that don't agree with that, as both their schools got left out. But, well, sorry, play somebody in the early season, Baylor and TCU. Quit playing a lot of cupcakes.
The only thing is
it hurt them.
The thing with the only thing that makes it controversial is that they've had this this release of the rankings throughout the year, and then in the end it doesn't really matter. That's the only thing that I would say. Just go ahead and do away with the weekly updates throughout the year, because they don't really matter until the last one.
That's true.
They just do away with that.
And really, the committee made it clear from this was not going to be your traditional poll. They were going to start from scratch every week, which that's a different way to approach polling. There was TCU sitting at number 3 and ended up a week later at number 6, despite the fact that they won. I think a lack of a conference championship game hurt the Big 12 this year as well.
It was a strong conference. Big 12 hasn't been as weak as it has been.
And they're going to have a chance to step out and play in both teams in some pretty high-profile bowl games. So they have a chance to make a statement, make a case for them, but both schools are going to have to bulk up their non-conference early season schedule. I think that ultimately is what killed them.
I think probably more so was the not having the championship game.
Mm-hmm.
If Baylor and TCU played in the championship game, one out, I figured one of them would have got in there. But not playing that last game as a conference championship probably hurt the conference. And the only issue I had was you do this playoff ranking update each week, and it gets the fans involved. I mean, every time that poll comes out, all the fans are just riled up about their team being in, or just being on the outside and have the hope of getting in. And then there towards the end of the year, if your team's in the poll, in that top 4 poll, you say, all we had to do is just win out and we're in the playoff, and that's not the case. And they didn't really communicate that, and that's what they need to, or at least people know now that that's not the way it is. But that's where I think college football messed up. Giving the impression that if your team's in and you'll continue to win, you'll stay in, and that wasn't the case. So that's probably where they messed up.
Yeah. And TCU and Baylor are both outstanding teams, and you can make an argument for their inclusion in the top 4. But I think when it's all said and done, it's going to be Alabama and Oregon in the championship game anyway. And I think they are the 2 best teams in college football this season. And
the Florida State Seminoles, they're undefeated.
Yeah,
they're right there.
They are.
No one's talking about them. They're defending national champs and undefeated.
That's true, but they're frankly lucky to be undefeated. You got to give them their props. They are undefeated. They hadn't lost a game in 2 years, but good luck against Alabama. I think that.
Oh no, they got Oregon.
Do they have Oregon?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you sure?
Yeah. Ohio State's got Alabama.
Oregon, that's right. Yeah. Well, good luck to them in that game too. You got to take your hat off to Ohio State, where they're down to their 3rd-string quarterback and just absolutely hammered Wisconsin. And they were the underdog at home, and they just destroyed Wisconsin. My goodness. How about Ezekiel Elliott, the Missouri boy, running wild up there for the Buckeyes?
Yeah, John Burrow's grad.
Yeah, that's true. Hated to see him get out of state. How'd we let that happen?
Yeah.
I think we'd have had him in black and gold this year.
Yeah. But
How about the lack of respect Mizzou continues to get nationally? Here you are, the two-time defending SEC East champions, and we're playing Minnesota in some kind of low middle tier bowl game. And come on,
is it the Liberty Bowl they're in?
No, it's not. It's not the Liberty Bowl. I forget which one. There's so many of them, but
Yeah.
and Minnesota's a top 25 team, and they've done well. Another Missouri boy and Coach Kill from Webb City coaching them, but. Here they're hovered around, 15, 16 in the poll, and go figure. I don't know. Just no respect at all for the Tigers.
Yeah. And, TCU's going to the Peach Bowl.
Yeah.
I can't remember who they're playing. They're going to the Peach Bowl, so, yeah.
They're playing a pretty high-profile team, but I can't remember offhand just who it is. Baylor's ended up with the Orange Bowl, I think, this year. So, it is what it is. At least they're settling it on the field instead of letting the computer dictate who the champion is this year, putting the two teams in. So I think at the end of the day, we'll see if the committee got it right.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to watch, though.
Be nice to see it expand to 6 teams. I wouldn't be in favor of it going any more than 6, but your top 2 teams would get a bye under that type of a system that gets your Baylors and TCUs in. And really beyond that, there was really no one in the discussion anyway. So maybe they'll consider that in the years to come.
Yeah, and just got to get the controversy riled up first.
That's true.
But be fun to watch, certainly with a playoff this year. And that'll pretty much wrap it up for a roundtable day. Appreciate you for tuning in as always. Look forward to seeing you. We won't see you next week. We'll have the Bloomfield Christmas Tournament well underway for the second day by next Saturday. So we'll take the next week off and be with you the following Saturday for the roundtable. But be sure to tune in for all 26 games. Maybe not all 26, but be sure to tune in to the Bloomfield Christmas Tournament, which will bring all 26 games. The Christmas Tournament from Bloomfield once again this year, starting the 26th, this coming Friday. And have yourself a great Christmas season. Be careful out there, and we'll see you next week for the Bloomfield Christmas Tournament. Take care, everyone.